Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Ref Show, which this week comes from Sheffield Hallam University Sports Park, the home of the inaugural Youdan Trophy. And with me in the studio to talk about it today are Youdan Trophy co-founders Keith Hackett, former head of Premier League referees, and Mark Halsey, a former Premier League referee himself. In addition to talking about the trophy, we'll also look at various other debating points within the refereeing world. We'll be asking, interfering or not interfering? That is the question, and it's quite a tough question to answer. So luckily for me, I have these two men with me to talk about new guidance on a certain aspect of the offside rule. We'll also be talking about provocation and gamesmanship between players and whether referees are tuned into it on the field of play. And also, we'll be looking back at the controversy surrounding the CONCACAF Gold Cup semi-final between Panama and Mexico and the referee's part within that game. But first of all, Keith, you're the man to ask about the Youdan Trophy. We're here for it. We haven't quite got the weather we wanted. No, it's pouring with rain at the moment, but the whole week is dedicated to this. Yes. What's it all about?
I think it's giving the players, first of all, the opportunity to play in an environment which is controlled by good officials. And we brought, very fortunate to have some world-renowned clubs in this inaugural tournament playing. And the idea is to link with the history of the game. You know, Sheffield's got this fantastic legacy that it doesn't promote around the world. You know, there was the Challenge Cup that was initially presented by Thomas Youdan. That was, in fact, the first tournament in which clubs competed for a trophy. And so, taking that history, we've created the Youdan Trophy with the intentions of creating an annual tournament that involves professional clubs and then down into grassroots football eventually, and women's soccer as well.
And it's not just what's happening on the field of play. I think you're doing workshops and seminars, aren't you, around it to educate as well?
Yes, well, I think that one thing that we want to do is we want to show young players that, you know, at the informative years, that referees are human and that they can talk to referees. And then we're taking young referees because there's a gap at the moment. I mean, ultimately, if you're promoting a 47-year-old guy onto the Premier League list this season, then we've got to ask, is succession planning working? I've seen some pretty good referees in non-league football, and they seem to be in this pond that never get out of the pond to the top level. So the idea here is to pass on our skill sets through people like Mark, Glenn Turner and others to enhance the referee's performance and then say to them, look, you have the opportunity of going further in the game to the top level, providing the foundation that they create is a good and sensible one.
Mark, you've been out there already today in the rain assessing. Yes. What noticeable differences were there from refereeing the men's senior game? Because you were involved with that for quite a long time. Obviously, these guys are 13, 14 years of age. Any stark differences?
I mean, obviously, I was watching the Rangers Sheffield Wednesday game, and I've got to say, the under-14s Rangers were absolutely outstanding, and the quality and the level of the skillful of what was going on was really, really good. And it's just a privilege to be here and watch these young lads, you know, seeing them play. But as the refereeing is concerned, yeah, I mean, you know, looking at a level 4 referee who's 26 years of age, Adam, that's looking to, you know, to go as high as he can from Staffordshire, and they've got the basics. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you referee at this level or the Premier League. You've got the basics, you're there. It's just fine-tuning these guys, you know, perhaps they look at the way they sprint, the way they move around the field, their whistling techniques. It's just little things that puts them up there and moves them up to the top. And, you know, looking at their nutrition, the way they eat and their fitness training. So it's been a good, for me, to talk to the guys on the first game. I've really enjoyed it.
One thing you said to me just before we started this was that you noticed there was no back chat as you might get in a senior game, and obviously there's less intimidation for a referee from a younger player than there might be for an adult.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to the coaches. We had a meeting last night, and I spoke with the coaches, and they, you know, I just said to them about, you know, their role models. They've got a set example on the technical areas, and they just said there's no problem with Will. There'd be no problem with our players, and, you know, looking at the first game, the behaviour of the young lads, because, you know, from that age 14 up to 16, the hormones start changing, don't they? So they can come a little bit a bit officious, and you see the guys on the Premier League and they copy what they do. But no, I've got to say it was really, really good.
It's a good point that he's made, because when you're developing a referee's skill sets, and even at the senior level, which we had to do with the Football League referees coming onto the Premier League or Conference League coming onto the Football League, is that you begin to have to look at their body language. How do they interact with the players? You know, it's very simple to put two flat palms of the hand that actually say, I'm not in conflict. And then there's the question of distance. Sometimes a referee can get too close to a player and look officious just in terms of the presence. So we're teaching them, and we'll talk about body language and distance from players, so they're not looking as though you're bullying them. And using some expressions. It might, you know, there's referees at the top level, I've seen them and listened in to the threats that they express under the pressure they're under. They threaten. And actually, when you look and learn from other sports like rugby union, the interaction often isn't a threat, it's just to say, I want an improvement. And that simple line actually gets a more positive reaction from the player. But yeah, make no mistake, when you're at the very highest level, the conflict between players and referees becomes more intense.
But that, I mean, coming on what Keith says, that's responding. It's all about accuracy of decision making, and we'll come on to that a little bit later with that, what you said about the semi-final. But it's the same at this level that it is at the top level. It's all about accuracy of decision making.
I'm going to test these two gentlemen's experience and knowledge now, because I mentioned at the beginning there that there's been a new interpretation for the offside rule, or in particular the specific matter of interfering with an opponent. Now, you won't mind if I refer to this because it's quite complicated. Let's point out, it's not a rule change. It's not a rule change. It's all about interpretation.
Listen, Mike, that's why I was a referee.
Now, this has been issued in the last sort of week to 10 days. It was accompanied by a document from the PGMOL, who set out various examples of professional games. And it says the rule, or the interpretation is, the two elements of this interpretation are, and this is how it reads, a player in an offside position shall also be penalised if he clearly attempts to play a ball which is close to him when this action impacts on an opponent, or makes an obvious action which clearly impacts on the ability of an opponent to play the ball. Now, I read this, a little bit bamboozled. I'm no refereeing expert. Is it any different to previous seasons?
I think the difference, first of all, is that the danger here is that the whole law was changed some years ago, mid-90s, I think, because the offside law was being used as a defence mechanism and goals were getting ruled out. So we bring in the changes, which in fact become more technical and certainly more difficult to apply from an assistant referee's point of view. And subjective. And then what you do is you say, right, okay, this is a group of assistant referees and referees, this is how you will operate it. You then have to communicate that to the players and to the managers. This change has come in far too late, because the managers, right, they receive that document, and like you and like myself, an experienced guy understanding law changes and the technical comments, suddenly become bemused and say, right, I'm going to interpret this particular change my way. And my fear is that this will bring confusion, as it's brought in the past when changes have been made. You need that period to be able to understand it, practice it, communicate it to players, communicate it to the media, and then we're all on the same page. I suspect this one's going to be off the page, and you're going to find officials inside the dressing room cowering round each other saying, were we right, were we wrong?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Keith, Mike, there's no difference. It's interpretation. It's not a law change. Now, if you look across Europe and the top leagues in Europe and the Champions League and the Europa League, they interpret it correctly. It's the PGMOL that's added confusion into the Premier League, into the Football League. And, you know, as it clearly says in law, any player that makes a challenge for the ball coming from an offside position, is non-active, then becoming active, is clearly interfering with the opponent and the play. And the same as if the ball's played through to him and he's in an offside position, but he's non-active, all of a sudden he becomes active, then you flag him offside. And that's where the confusion's come in England, is because we haven't been doing that.
It's a difficult thing to explain, but we'll be back in part 2 to talk about provocation and gamesmanship by players and whether referees are aware of what's going on the pitch, and also looking at that controversial game in the CONCACAF Gold Cup semi-final. We'll be back shortly.